The Morning Sports Desk, available on demand on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and WDenaRadio.com.
It is the Morning Sports Desk on a Tuesday, the 1st of October. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There is Corey Tackman. Corey, it's the Morning Sports Desk, and we're starting things off giving a shout out to the Park Region Conference. Sticking in that area, Pillager Huskies' Aiden Schuett reaches 1,000 career digs. It happened over the weekend on Saturday at the Bertha Hewitt tournament. The Pillager School, in a Facebook post, said, "Congratulations, Aiden Schuett, for getting your 1,000th career dig at the Bertha Hewitt tournament. Congratulations to an awesome career achievement. Go Huskies." The Huskies went 2-2 in their 4 matches in that tournament. Their victories came against Hancock and Catholic Bena. The Huskies, Corey, are 10-12 on the season, 2-2 in the PRC, 0-3 in Section 6 AA games. They do play Staples Motley tonight, so they have a chance to get their first section win of the season at the Pillager Gymnasium. And there's a picture up on the website as well, WDenaRadio.com. We have a little write-up along with a picture from the Facebook page of the Pillager Schools having Aiden holding that banner with their teammates and stuff like that. So a really cool achievement. We always hear about, kills and sets and 1,000 digs. So there you go.
Congratulations, Aiden. Good job.
Good job. Hey, Corey, we're going to recap a volleyball game I had last night between Wadena Deer Creek and Park Rapids area. The Panthers, 6-6 on the season. Coach Norby in her second year of running the Panther volleyball program, and they had 2 wins in Section 8 AA so far this season. They're 2-3, and after falling last night, went 2-4 to Wadena Deer Creek. But we're 2-3 coming into the game in Section 8 AA play. Last year, they only won 2 section games all season, and that includes the first round playoff game that they won in Roseau. So for them to already get to that number is good, and kind of taking that next step up in the program under Coach Norby. They're a very experienced team. There's 8 seniors on that roster.
Wow.
A lot of experience on that team. And they were a little taken aback in that first set by Wadena Deer Creek. Wolverines came out and took the first set easily. And I thought, Corey, with each set, each of the next 3, Park Rapids area got better and better and better. They blew a lead to Wadena Deer Creek in the second set. Wolverines were down 23-17, ended up rallying to coming back to win in extra points, 26-24. And then won in the fourth set, excuse me. Sets are hard. One in the fourth. There was a lot of them last night. It was hard to keep them all on track. And set number 4, they won 25-15 and pretty much just ran away, or 25-12, and just ran away with that second set and hid and got it to a decisive 5th set. Wadena Deer Creek, though, as we talk about, it's a sprint in those 5-set games in that 5th set. And the Wolverines just got out that early burst, and it was enough for them to hang on and win that final set 15-7. Wolverines do come away with the victory. Peyton Gravel had, I believe, 17 kills with 4 service aces on the night. Pretty good night for her at the office. Around 13 kills or so for Kennedy Ness on the Wolverines side of things. Wadena Deer Creek had a little bit of issues, and we'll get to that in a second, but overall was very impressed with how Park Rapids area played and felt like they got better with each and every set. Unfortunately, they just didn't get the start they wanted in the 5th one. But overall, I think Coach Norby would be very happy with the performance they put out on the road. Corey, I looked between the series between these 2 former mid-state teams. Of course, now Park Rapids area in the Heart of Lakes Conference, and the Wolverines have been in the Park Region Conference for almost a decade now. But in the last 10 seasons, these 2 teams, now with the Wolverines winning, are 4-2 in favor of Wadena Deer Creek in this series, and the last 4 games have all been won by Wadena Deer Creek dating back to 2017. So it's always fun to look in that with the Highway 71 rivalry in these 2 teams and just kind of going at each other one more time. It's always fun to get a rivalry like this going. It was a fun atmosphere in the gym.
Yeah, I had the match on to start, and I thought for sure that it just was not going to be a good match at all. Wadena Deer Creek jumped out in such a big flourish right out of the gate, and I was like, "Holy smokes! I guess we're just going to be an early one here tonight, huh?" And then then I had to put boys to bed, and then Monday Night Football was on. By the way, quick aside, did you see the Detroit Lions jerseys last night?
Yeah, really good.
Really good. They're a little too close to Carolina for like a full-time uniform.
But it's like a wear it on a Monday night game.
Really good. Really good uniform. And then all of a sudden we get a text message from you and it's 11:30 at night or whatever it is. You're like, we're off to a fifth set. Holy smokes. Good job. And so a nice, fun, competitive match, a good way to kick off the week for us.
Yeah, I thought overall, and this is going over some Park Rapids area Panthers stats here, a really good game for Ryland Fogarty. Had 5 kills with 6 service aces overall in the night. 3 service aces for Hallie Eichens, 3 for Maggie Meyer, all these for Park Rapids area. Meyer, by the way, had 9 kills, 11 kills for Anna Yelnimi, who had a good game, and Allie Michelson as well, a junior, finished with 8 kills. So overall, a good night for them as well. And I think a lot of it's a serve-receive night, and it's one of those, we've talked about this, Corey. What do you attribute to when a team gets a lot of service aces? Is it a team having a really good serve, or is it the other team struggling in the serve-receive? And I think for both teams, it was a little bit of both. Like, there's a lot of service aces last night, and it's a 5-set game, so it's going to be, in just raw numbers, is going to be bigger. But I think both coaches will tell you, we're happy with our serves, but our serve receives could use a little bit of fine-tuning, and Coach Volkman has talked about that for Wadena Deer Creek all season long, of like, we just got to get tighter, and there's just some, there's some, Sue, Corey, she uses the term unforced errors, and that's something that they just need to clean up, and Wadena Deer Creek still trying to find the right rhythm that they want their team to be in, rolling through a few different rotations and starters, and just trying to see what sticks, and sometimes all it is just moving one player to a different thing, and for whatever reason, it's just going to click. The Wolverines have won volleyball games, but they just haven't quite, hit their stride as we're now past the midway point in the season. In the Section 8 AA standings, Park Rapids area kind of locked into that 9. There's anywhere between 7 and 10 kind of feels like where they're going to land. And for Wadena Deer Creek, it feels like they're locked into that 3 seed with the tiebreakers and with the QRF. East Grand Forks isn't catching them, and with the tiebreaker Holly has over them, they're not catching them, and DGF is just so far and above in QRF right now that Wadena Deer Creek feels like they're going to be a 3 seed, which is what they were a year ago, and they went to the state tournament. So it's not an indictment on anything, but it feels like that's where it's going to be, and I wonder how comfortable that is as a coach, knowing like we could lose the section game and like it's not going to affect our playoff position. We're kind of locked in, but also like if that plays on a team too of like, there's not an end of the season like, hey, if we want to get this spot, we got to beat this team. It's fascinating, and every coach has a different perspective. So I look forward to talking with Sue about that at the end of the week in Wolverines Weekly, but we'll until then. Hey, Corey, you have a game tonight on the Superstation, and our full broadcast schedule is online at WDenaRadio.com. But for those who are listening right now and just want to hear what it is, what do you got tonight?
I've got the Bertha Hewitt Bears at the Parkers Prairie Panthers non-conference volleyball action tonight. Again, like you mentioned, 105.9 FM, the Superstation K106, Superstation K106 app, and WDenaRadio.com. Panthers, the home team, 11-5 overall. They're 6-0 in Little 8 play, 7-3 in section play. What does that mean? It means they're tied atop the Little 8 standings with Hillcrest Lutheran Academy, each 6-0. Now, Hillcrest Lutheran Academy in their QRF, CJ, 92.7. Parkers Prairie at 60.0. So Hillcrest is beating everybody. They're 18-0 overall.
They're solid.
And they're also beating bigger schools to have that sort of QRF standings. Hillcrest Lutheran Academy is the top seed right now in the Section 6A North subsection. Again, 14-0 in section play, 18-0 overall. That 92.7 QRF value. They're ranked 9th in Class A volleyball. Parkers Prairie finds themselves in the south half of Section 6A, where it is somehow even more top heavy and competitive. BBE is the top team in the South standings. They're are pretty good. Number 2, according to the QRF in the state. They're 19-2 overall. West Central area is second in those South standings. They're ranked 7th overall, according to the QRF. And then Clinton Graceville Beardsley is 3rd, with Parkers Prairie 4th in that section. So that would mean right now they would host Brandon Evansville if the playoffs were to start today, the 5-seed Brandon Evansville. Bertha Hewitt comes in 10-9 overall, CJ. They're 1-3 in Park Region Conference play, 6-3 in section play. In that Park Region Conference, Wadena Deer Creek undefeated atop the conference standings. Sabika's 4-1, New York Mills 3-1, Henning 3-2, Pillager 2-2, and then Bertha Hewitt is 1-3. Monaga and Verndale each looking for their first conference victory of the season. Bertha Hewitt in Section 5 and in the West subsection. Right now, they would be the 3 seed in that section or subsection. Sabika, the number 1 overall team there, with the QRF ranking of 33. They're 7-6 overall. Browerville Eagle Valley is number 2. Then Bertha Hewitt, number 3 in the Section 5A West standings. Swanville, by the way, the number 1 team on the east side of Section 5A. 7 o'clock pregame, 7:15 first serve tonight. Superstation K106. You remember all those details. That's the plan. Look forward to heading to Parkers Prairie tonight.
That's the plan, Stanley. All right. Looking at just kind of Twins news, and nothing really to report on yet. It's been said on podcasts and just kind of floating around that while Falvey is still in place, while Rocco Baldelli is still in place, major changes at that point are expected to come. Now, I don't know if that means they're going to fire a hitting coach, fire a pitching coach, if they're going to clean out some higher levels of the front office under Falvey. We'll see. Falvey said he wasn't going to comment on anyone's job statuses other than Rocco in the presser he did, which, by the way, I know we talked about this yesterday, and I don't want to get into this, but Rocco Baldelli, post-game presser, or in the last weekend of the season, said, "No, I don't have a problem with fans booing. I think, frankly, like, they were awesome last year, and the fact that we weren't awesome this year, like, that's kind of just how it is in baseball. You got to accept it." He's like, "We played bad." Essentially, it's like, we played bad. I don't blame the fans. The fans were great last year when we were good. Like, we weren't good, so they didn't have a reason to be great. He says, "This is going to stick with me for a long time." Basically, he's like, "I do feel this collapse. Like, I'm just not like, yeah, whatever." And Derek Falvey had not like crying, but had to like, he was choked up and had to take a 39-second pause, according to people who are writing and in the room on that presser, of like, "I'm not going to get over this for a long time. This was a failure, and we understand it's a failure, and we got to figure out what to do." Now, again, they actually have to do the thing, but it's like they acknowledge they effed up. They acknowledge what went wrong was bad, and they're not like, "Well, you see, actually, our projections said," like, they're like, "No, this is bad. This was bad." And then you have Joe Paulette, who comes in and says, "This was a business decision, and I'll make it again." Like, everybody's like, this is awful. We can't believe this happened. We let everybody down, our fans down. This is unacceptable. And coming in as your team president who goes, "I'll effing do it again." And basically that whole point of the presser, Corey, was to go, the whole point was to assure people that they weren't cutting payroll more, which is like, congratulations. You guys are 28th in payroll, or like bottom 5 in payroll. Or was it supposed to go down? Oh, congratulations. That's like, it's like your parents being like, "Hey, your allowance is $20 a month. We're cutting it. You're only making $5 a month." You go, "What? How am I supposed to, like, whatever?" And then you go, "Yeah, but don't worry. It's still going to be $5 next month. We're not going down to $250. I mean, okay, if that was the binary choice, but I feel like this doesn't have to be. So anyway, just we talk about tone deaf. After reading some more stuff, that's just an extra layer of like tone deafness that those guys have, where like your front office and management are like, "We can't believe this happened. This was a failure. Like, we need to take responsibility for that." And a guy has said, "We're all partially to blame," goes, "But I mean, I don't see any other way I could have did my job," which is essentially throwing those two guys under the bus.
Right.
Because
I mean, at least somebody's taking ownership. Unfortunately, it's two people who really have no say over the final product that the team puts out there.
Right. Sucks. So anyway,
them and good for them, but whatever.
We'll see if the Twins fire hitting coach Dave Popkins. That's my kind of going theory. I don't think Pete Mackey, the pitching coach, gets fired, even though the bullpen fell apart. I don't really think that that's the pitching coach's issue. I don't think it's Rocco's issue that the bullpen sucked, because everybody sucked. It's not like there was one guy who was above and away better when every addition that got brought in was bad.
Right.
Like it's not really the fault. It's like when Molitor would throw at Addison Reed and he gets shellacked. It's like, well, it's not Molitor's fault that the Twins signed Addison Reed. He has to use him. Like you have to pitch some of these guys. So anyway, whatever. Anyway, we'll see. The trendy name, or a name that's been floated out, was even Thad Levine, the Twins general manager, maybe vacating his position, although that's a rumor. So that's nothing to like, this will happen. It's just been floated around. So
that would be if he's got a job, if somebody's hiring him, if somebody's stealing him away.
We're going to let you go.
Right.
But yeah, like we're not, cause anyway, so that is what it is. All right, Corey, Timberwolves media day yesterday, they're back. They're ready for training camp. But it's just a weird feeling because they were expecting Karl Anthony Towns to be there yesterday. And
we were expecting them.
We all were. We all were expecting that.
I guess the players were surprised too. So I stepped on your intro. I'm sorry.
You're all good. But like, Anthony Edwards talked about how like he called Cat and they talked for a long time and whatever. And we'll get into the Cat conversation, or we'll get into Anthony Edwards conversation later. I do want to talk about Karl Anthony Towns because we went long yesterday because a billion things happened. So the Timberwolves traded Karl Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle. I was about to say Julius Irving. Can we get him? Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, and a first-round draft pick. I believe that's protected from the Pistons, like lottery protected. So
yes,
they get that. I mean, it's not a huge haul for Karl Anthony Towns. There's two ways of viewing this trade. And one is just the pure value, in which case the Wolves, they offloaded a contract. They now got below the second apron of the luxury tax. They're still going to pay some tax, but because Randall and DiVincenzo do have some, not big contracts, but they're not cheap contracts. And whatever, they got under the second apron. And they did get a player off the bench in DiVincenzo who's going to help out this team immensely. And, Randall can slide in and take that spot that Karl Anthony Towns had in the starting lineup, and you kind of move from there. And the Wolves get a 3-point sharpshooter and scoring in their second unit that they desperately needed, and was evident when they got to the Western Conference Finals, that they just did not have the scoring to keep up when their defense couldn't be top one in the NBA every single night. There's also the second way of viewing this, which is Karl Anthony Towns is the longest tenured Timberwolf. He's been there he was drafted in the summer of 2015, I believe. So this would have been his 10th season with the Timberwolves. And 3 days before training camp, he got traded to the New York Knicks. And implications for Cat playing with Tibbs again aside, it feels weird because that guy had been through so much crap with Timberwolves basketball and had finally gotten through on the other side. And the team traded him. So there's been two schools of thought of people who are like, I love the return, I love it, or, I'm okay with the return, that's fine. And there's a lot of people who are so emotionally, and I don't say this as a bad thing, but there's so many people that are emotionally invested in Karl Anthony Towns because he's been there for a decade. And most of these people were in elementary school when he first got here and are now adults. Like, it's weird to see that guy leave and just kind of the way it was handled. Now, we'll get into some of this in a second. But, Corey, what's your gut feeling? Because there's two ways to view the trade. I'm more on the value side. I think the Wolves got enough. It sucks for Cat that he's got to get traded, but that's kind of the nature of the beast, and we all kind of saw this coming, right?
Yeah. I mean, they've been talking about Karl not being a part of the Timberwolves, and I mean the amorphous being that exists out in the world.
The NBA media apparatus.
Correct. About Karl not being a Timberwolves member of the Timberwolves for much longer anyway. Like, anybody who's surprised that Karl Anthony Towns is not a Timberwolf anymore hasn't been paying attention.
Or is just like putting on a little rose-colored glasses and trying to whistle through it.
Surprised by how it happened and when it happened? Sure, I understand that because it snuck up on everybody. It seemed like a big surprise, the timing of it. I mean, like you said, 3 days before training camp starts, you just kind of expect everyone to be there. It's a weird way to start the season. But just on the gut reaction of this is really happening to it was always going to be Carl. It was always going to be Carl who was the piece that was moved. His contract was enormous, and his impact probably made a little redundant on this roster. And there were cheaper options that you could Moneyball make up in the aggregate. And it was never going to be, or it was always going to be Carl, the piece that was moved. The thing that still sticks with me after 3 days or 4 days or whatever it's been since that trade is I cannot believe that poor guy's got to go play for Tibbs again. It's the one thing. I have some like basketball fit things that we can talk about, but the one thing I keep coming back to is poor Karl Anthony Towns, who, as weird and as awkward and kind of like socially and personally unaware as he's been over his time, has really had nothing to do but persevere through some absolute personal and professional carnage. And now he's got to go play for the guy who delivered the professional carnage to his career. That guy in New York sucks. And I feel terrible for Carl that he has to play for him again.
Let's not forget, by the way, that Karl Anthony Towns, like you talked about, went through that carnage because Jimmy Butler tacitly just was trying to show him up and embarrass him, not just in the team, but nationally. And Tibbs was okay with it. Because what repercussions did Jimmy Butler have for that practice? That infamous practice? Nothing. Tibbs was still holding out hope that he was. The reason Jimmy Butler performed that was so Tibbs would trade him. But as we all thought at the time, Tibbs was probably okay with that practice. He was hoping that it would make everybody, because Tibbs he's a guy that he is, he's a dude that wants to fight everyone in the parking lot and wants everybody else to fight each other in the parking lot. He was hoping that it would make everybody have an FU streak. But all it did was just belittle a budding franchise piece. And whether Jimmy Butler was right about Cat is irrelevant. And by the way, he wasn't, because the Wolves did win with Karl Anthony Towns as a centerpiece. I know Cat has a lot of haters. And look, we've talked about it. His critiques are justified. I think his hate is over-justified, but his critiques aren't. And the Wolves don't win that Game 7 in Denver without Karl Anthony Towns. They don't get to the Western Conference Finals without Karl Anthony Towns coming back from a meniscus injury earlier than expected and playing his guts out so the Wolves can get to the Western Conference Finals. Now, what happened in that series was like a total system failure, and he played bad, but a lot of the team played bad, so it wasn't necessarily all on Karl Anthony Towns. But for people who are saying that it's just that the Wolves aren't taking a risk by trading this guy and kind of uprooting their team structure, it's huge. That guy is the good guy award for everybody. People have said, like, my mom died or I had somebody get sick, and Karl Anthony Towns donated $1,500 to my GoFundMe, and I've never met the guy. Like, that his mom was lost to COVID.
He had a charity event 2 days later that he showed up to in full Timberwolves gear. He's just I think everybody personally roots for that guy.
His mom died of COVID in the middle of the pandemic. Like, he's lost other family members, like, due to illness. I don't know if it was COVID specifically. Like, that guy's been through a lot. And he always is a guy who's, like, goofy, for lack of a better term. And I mean that in an endearing way. Like, he's a guy that was always there. And he was a guy that, through all of the carnage and through everything, even Kevin Love in his run, and he was drafted in the Wolves in 2009 and was traded by 2014. So it was like 5 years he was in a Timberwolves uniform. Get me out of here. Karl Anthony Towns was here for a decade, and for the first, like, up until 2020. So in that same time frame, the Wolves were back to being a laughingstock. Rosas got fired. It was embarrassing for the organization. Nobody knew how good Anthony Edwards was going to be yet. Like, he could have easily said, get me out of here. I'm done with this organization. He was constantly, whether it was because of just his character, whether it was his relationship with Flip Saunders, he's like, I'm determined to turn this place around. And at the very least, no matter what happens with Karl Anthony Towns, he's going to finish right now. Ant will pass him soon. But right now, he is the second best Timberwolf of all time. He is somebody who left the organization in a better spot than where he found it. And I know Anthony Edwards has a lot to talk about that, and Tim Conley, and there's a couple things that did happen. It wasn't all because of Cat, but he certainly was a part of the reason why this team and this franchise is now in a much better position than they are. And when the Wolves were bad under Tibbs and a laughingstock was because they, not entirely, but a lot in part because they decided Karl Anthony Towns needed to be banished to the corner and not part of this success. that's something. And that, I think, is something, as everybody's upset, a lot of Cat fans are upset that he's gone. Take solace in the fact that he did set out to what he accomplished, even if it wasn't a championship. Minnesota is done being the laughingstock of the NBA.
Yeah, I think about him getting drafted by Flip and then Flip dying and his whole kind of career and course of that franchise being just totally flipped on its hind end, right? I mean, you think about who Flip was as a coach and what he was going to try to do
perfect
offensively, and they're just, and then, you know, you bring in, you know, there was the buffer there, of course, but then you bring Tibbs in and it's and just the exact opposite, because he was just the biggest name available. And without any sort of, like, Tibbs would have never drafted Karl Anthony Towns. I think it's pretty straightforward. That would have never been, it was just a complete mismatch and a complete bungling from, you know, an ownership group that has bungled.
They hired an outside search firm, by the way, to get to that decision.
Yeah, so it was just not the guy like persevered through a lot, and I think in a decade or whenever he's done, people will think pretty highly of Karl Anthony Towns and his time. That will have over that time become sugar-coated. I think the stuff about him that's the criticism of him, like you talked about, are very real and are not to be forgotten. You know, but it is important to know that personally, that guy persevered through a lot and is a really good player. And he's going to be, it just sucks for him that he's got to go play for that bridge troll again.
By the way, Karl Anthony Towns, the night that it was traded, he found out, I think, over Twitter, and a lot of people freaked out about that right away. And then I think John Krasinski of The Athletic reported that the reason that he found out was because Tim Connelly was on his way to his house. Tim Connelly drove to his house to sit with him in person and explain the trade, which Mike Conley talked about. He's like, yesterday at Media Days, like, not a lot of organizations do that, if any. And that was we understand what this trade means for a multitude of things, and especially for Karl. The Timberwolves are his identity. We're going to go talk to you in person. Mm-hmm. And it sucks that Shams put it out 5 minutes too early, and with Woj, maybe it was an hour too early, but you know, whatever. That's the first big bomb without Woj's name in front of it. But the fact that Tim Connelly went to Karl Anthony Towns' house to talk with him, and it's not a fun conversation, I'm sure Cat still doesn't make it better for him, I'm sure, but the Wolves did try to handle this the best they could, knowing the situation. And he was at the Wolves facility at 3 a.m. with his dad. There was an Instagram story of him and his dad just shooting hoops at Mayo Clinic Square. Mm-hmm. Because what else is he going to do? That guy, and I'm sure he's never going to say this publicly, but he's like, I got to go play for Tibbs again? No. In New York, where they're, at least in Minnesota, we all went like, that guy is a mess in Tibbs. New York loves Tibbs because he's in your face and he yells and he talks about defense.
Well, and they won.
They've won.
It's, I don't know. I've given my diatribe on Tibbs before and how they're fake wins. I don't need to go into it again. They're going to be a 1 or a 2 seed or a 3 seed in the East again this year, barring everybody's health. But at some point, he is going to kill Jalen Brunson, and it's going to be everyone else's fault for not working hard enough.
Right, in his absence
to pick up where he left off.
I like how the Wolves went with Jimmy Butler, where he missed 3 months. So everybody else should have just worked harder.
I have no patience for that guy. That's not how you do it. That's just not how you do it. So that part of it sucks for him. It's going to be cool if he's awesome in New York. By the way, he's going to be beloved, and he is been more reliable, at least as far as playing goes, than Julius Randle. Julius Randle's been out. I mean, Karl's had his injury problems all of a sudden too.
Partially because Cat, for the first however many years of his career, especially under Tibbs, never was on the bench.
Well, and this is important too. Like they did just trade for a guy, the New York Knicks. If we want to get into the basketball part of this a little bit, the Knicks did just trade for a guy who is off of 3 straight seasons of a leg injury. And maybe 2 straight seasons, and Tibbs is not going to sub him out ever. He's going to play 6 guys, 7 guys, you know, he's going to play 7 guys max, and You're going to Josh Hart played 48 minutes a game every game through the entire playoffs. Like, that's just not, Carl's going to get hurt again. He's going to get hurt again because he's not going to be, that's just not how Tibbs does it.
Nova boys rise up. That was a thing. Now DiVincenzo got traded. That's not necessarily a great thing for them. But, I mean, yeah, you're right. Cat's going to get in New York. I think if he plays well, especially, they will like him. And by the way, there's a couple fun things about this. One is he's probably going to make a few more All-Star games in the Eastern Conference. That path will just be a little bit more open for him, considering the bigs in the West.
Sure.
And that's going to help his kind of legacy in terms of that. The other thing is the Cat Embiid rivalry gets to kind of get reignited again, which will be funny. Cat and Jimmy Butler will be interesting now that he's going to play in the Eastern Conference. There is a couple things, not that Cat has like going to fight them in the parking lot or anything, but just, I mean, you've seen it, the Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy chirping about a foul, and he's going to call Rachel Nichols and stuff like that. And everybody likes to play it off, but those two guys do not like each other.
Nope.
They're going to play it off like, oh, we were just competitive teammates. We're just jawing back and forth. But those two guys want to throw each other into a wall. But overall, I think this could work. And you're already seeing, by the way, now that he's in the New York media market, it's going to be very volatile for him. But there's already Knicks accounts now saying, like, by the way, just so we're clear, Cat's better than I don't think it was Embiid. It was somebody else, some other big in the East. And it was like, oh, I think it was Porzingis. Like, just so you know, Cat is more talented and better than Porzingis. Knicks fans are already on the bench, which is cool to see because somebody said, and this is in Twitter language, so it's a little hyperbole, you'd be shot for making that claim 6 months ago if you were a Wolves fan. Now the Knicks fans have a little bit more numbers behind them to help kind of echo that claim. I'm not saying it's right or not, but I am saying that Cat will, at least, if he plays well early, if he gets the New York media behind him, will be very helpful for him. Because in Minnesota, even the Minnesota fans backing him did nothing because there's no big KSTP for as good a job as they do. Is not quite the same as the New York Post putting out something on the back page.
Right.
But all right. Other things. One last thing, Corey. This means it's Ant's team. It officially 100% without a doubt is Anthony Edwards' team. And while it had been that way, kind of the worst kept secret is that really it was. This is like it's not just on Ant on the floor. Like, this is your team off the floor. Conley has probably, I know he signed a 2-year extension, but Chris Finch said he's going to play less games this year than he did a year ago. Like, they are going to lessen his workload, especially considering the deep playoff run they went on. This is Cat's team, or Ant's team, excuse me. He needs to, Cat's not handling locker room stuff anymore. That's you. And I don't know, this isn't an indictment of Ant. I don't know how ready he is for it, but look, at a certain point, you need to take the training wheels off. And it's time to take the training wheels off, I think.
Yeah, he's ready. And there's if you want to get into preliminary without having seen anything, like basketball fit sort of options. One of the things that this team really needed in the playoffs, it became evident, is that they needed a guy who could just go get a bucket in a way that, like, Carl can score and he defended Jokic really well and all those things. But like, Randall's a different type of scorer, right? So to bring in a guy like Randall to supplement what Ant is going to do, that's going to get stagnant at times, especially early on. It's going to be weird, but they're going to have, like, Randall is a bucket getter. He's going to, he's going to be a guy when they're on the floor together. You just have to, like, it's going to be, they can create havoc together, which is in a different way than they could with Carl. And then DiVincenzo's going to bring the added depth of, like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker isn't feeling it in this playoff series. Maybe this is the series where DiVincenzo is feeling it. Like, I do like the added potential offensive depth and options now that this team has, especially because I feel like Nas supplements what Carl did by 85% or whatever. He's not as good of a defender as Carl was in the specific instance of defending Jokic, and Randall's definitely a worse defender. Like, they're worse defensively on a 1-to-1 if you think about the West having to run through Denver.
Right.
Now, you think the West runs through Dallas
or Oklahoma City,
and Hardenstein doesn't scare you as a big, and you need more versatility and length and athletic and whatever. This team is now better suited for that sort of Western Conference matchup that's in front of them. I like that it's Ant's team to bring the whole conversation back around. It always was. He answered questions once again perfectly at the media day. And he's always been very savvy that way, intentionally or not.
He's always charismatic.
He's just been really good at understanding, like, I understand all of you think this is my team, but how can you think that because Carl's been here? There's no one else that can be now. It's Anthony Edwards' team. It's Naz's team. It's Jaden McDaniel. Like there's this trio of guys who are kind of coming up together, and he needs to be the superstar. He needs to be the center of it all. He needs to be, and you're not throwing him under the bus by getting rid of Carl and bringing in Swampwater to replace it. You're bringing in a guy at Julius Randle who can score 25 points a game every single night for you.
And another thing too, the Wolves got a first-round pick from Detroit. That's going to be they're not using it. That's trade.
Right. And also, is it fair to say that is Julius Randle on this team at the end of the year?
That's another thing. Some people are like, is this just kind of a, hey, he's going to play with us, and in a couple months or in a couple, like initially it was like, are the Wolves getting a trade? And it's been thrown out there like, is it Kevin Durant? Because Ant just adores Kevin Durant, especially playing with him in the Olympics. But
there's 2 years left on Randall's deal. And if he doesn't get traded by this one, he's traded by the next trade deadline because he's an expiring, and there's a lot of money there, and
he's clearly filling a void.
And he's good. So there's going to be a team who might need him and supplement, to supplement their roster for a push to allow the Timberwolves, whatever. There's a lot of moving pieces here. And we know that that's true because Carl got moved at a time where we thought it was too late to move someone.
This is a good time to buy a Karl Anthony Towns jersey, by the way.
I think very cheap.
Very cheap, and I might, because I try not to buy jerseys of people that are younger than me. It's just a little weird. And Cat's like just barely on that threshold. Whatever. So, by the way, the longest tenured Minnesota Timberwolf right now, Naz Reid.
It is Naz, huh? That's funny.
It's Naz, who was drafted in 2019, I think, because he was undrafted in the year. I can't remember who else they took. I think it was because they whiffed on what's his name, Jarrett Culver, I think, and then they ended up finding Naz, and then the next year, or did they take Jaden? I think Jaden and McDaniels and Ant were in the same draft. So after whiffing on that lottery pick in Culver, they then found Naz Reid as an undrafted free agent, and then the next year they drafted Ant and Jaden.
They got lucky with Naz.
Oh yeah, and heck, that's kind of all it is. The Vikings in 2014 had an unreal draft class that they rode for 6 years. With Eric Kendrick.
There's a reason why he was undrafted is because he was 100 pounds overweight and not athletic, and he couldn't really shoot that well, but he figured out how to play the college game.
He went to an organization that was so bad that could just allow him to still be around and figure it out.
He turned himself into an unbelievable basketball player. And there's no one who can predict that. Shout out Naz Reid.
Shout out Naz Reid. Fair to say the Wolves are going to need to be hitting the Naz button more. Just punch it, tap it. Even Finch said, I got to hit it more. Said, I got to call Jaden's number more. Rob Dillingham. We're not even talking about the guy the Wolves traded up for in the draft. This is going to be fascinating, and they should be good, which is awesome.
The big overarching picture for this to me is that the Timberwolves do not think the West runs through Jokic anymore.
Right.
It's very clear. This move means,
and it might not. They have Westbrook
but Jokic is the best player in the league by far. If Murray was really bad during the Olympics and he was bad in the playoffs, and maybe there's just this if they don't have anybody, Aaron Gordon's not a number 2. What OKC has done to improve their roster and how they're just going to naturally improve. The West went through Dallas a year ago, and Luka's only going to get better. And they've got it seems this was a move where, hey, for the first time, we were the first to be bigger than everyone else. need to be bigger than we need to
right size.
Yeah. So that seems very clear is the Thunder get Hardenstein so they can play against the Wolves, so they can have some beef and compete with that. And the Wolves understood that they need to be able to be a little more athletic.
They need to have a little more punch on offense.
Yeah.
And they did. And they've gotten, and this is also something where the Wolves viewed, and then we'll be done here. This from Krasinski, who obviously heard this from Conley. This isn't a move by trading Cat. They could have ran it back, and I think everybody would have been 100% acceptable with that. They went to the Western Conference Finals, run that team back again.
Well, we would have, because how surprised were we when they traded him? We were all prepared for it to run back.
Right, and I don't think people would have been like, how could you decide to run it back? I think that was fairly acceptable to do that again. And this was a move where it's like we could have kept Cat and been competitive for the next couple and then been in salary heck for a little bit and kind of figured it out. We could have made an all-in push the next 2 seasons, or we trade for an expiring contract in Randall. DiVincenzo's here, and now we have a first-round pick, and now we have just a little bit more salary wiggle room, whether to sign somebody or trade for somebody. This is to basically, the term was be competitive throughout Ant's prime. And that's what the goal was, not to be competitive the next 2 years.
It goes back to the Rudy deal too. Like you do the trade for Rudy so that way you can ease that transition. You can give Anthony Edwards the best possible case. So when he's ready, he's already seen signs of success.
Right. He doesn't have to figure it out on his own.
By the way, salary cap heck, as you described it, is still on the horizon.
Oh yeah, it's still there.
Nas and Rudy are due a bunch of money in pretty short order. That there's going to have to be a reckoning with some of that down the line.
They're still over the luxury tax. They're just not in the second apron. There's like the second level of luxury tax.
Yeah, it was, and being over the first one is not crippling.
A lot of teams do it.
The
and
second one is a tough one.
The Wolves are making enough money now where even Glenn Taylor will justify spending the luxury tax. He did it with Jimmy Butler. Like he did it with D'Angelo Russell. Like he'll do it. The second apron is too much. And I think it's a lot for most owners, which is, it's not a salary cap, but it might as well be.
Well, you have to be Boston, or
right.
You have to be Golden State.
You have to be Matt Ishaba, who's a tech bro.
Well, and you have to have the Timberwolves haven't won a championship.
Right.
So, like, if they had a bunch of bona fide guys who are winning championships, like, you suck it up to win a championship. But if you're not winning championships and there's wiggle room and on the roster and you can get under that second apron, you have to, like, that's where the Joe Polat, it's a business decision, comes into play.
Just a little bit. This has been the morning sports desk for Tuesday, the 10th month of the year and the first day
of
October.
Start over. Boo.
Oh, this has been the morning sports desk for Tuesday, October 1st. Get out of here.
The Morning Sports Desk, available on demand on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and WDCANradio.com.